Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. US President Joe Biden has suspended drone strikes outside of war zones where US forces are deployed. The Pentagon says any drone strikes against terrorist groups outside Afghanistan, Iraq or Syria will require approval from the White House. The move reverses former President Donald Trump's policy, who had given the military free rein in countries like Somalia. United Kingdom's Chief of Defence Staff General Nicholas Patrick Carter has lauded Pakistan's continuous efforts for peace and stability in the region. He was meeting with Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. Pakistan's military media wing said matters of mutual interest, including the Afghan peace process and defence cooperation, were also discussed during the meeting. The Arab coalition says it has intercepted another armed drone launched by Yemen's Houthis towards southern Saudi Arabia. Saudi state media says the explosive-laden drone was aimed at Homs Mushaid city. The latest strike comes after the US called on the Yemeni rebels to stop attacking and start negotiating for peace. The global number of coronavirus cases has crossed 117 million, with the death toll approaching 2.6 million. The United Kingdom recorded its lowest number of infections and deaths in 5 months, with 65 fatalities and some 4,700 cases overnight. Meanwhile, Mexico's death toll has surpassed 190,000, while its infections tally has crossed 2.1 billion. Pakistan has reported over 1,300 new cases and 54 more deaths overnight, with a toll over 13,200. And in football, Chelsea continues their impressive turnaround as they beat Everton 2-0 in their Premier League encounter. The win leaves the Blues in 4th place with 50 points to ahead of 5th place West Ham, who dominated Leeds United 2-0. And these were top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's move on with the news stories. President Joe Biden has suspended drone strikes outside of war zones where US forces are deployed. The move reverses former President Donald Trump's policy, which gave the military free rein in countries like Somalia. The Pentagon says any drone strikes outside Afghanistan, Iraq or Syria will require approval from the White House. At a news conference, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby termed the measure interim guidance. Kirby said it was issued to ensure that the president has full visibility on proposed significant actions. However, he said the decision is not permanent and does not mean a cessation of strikes. Kirby added Washington is committed to working with global partners to counter the persistent threat of extremism. The United States says it is too early to say how the Afghan peace talks are going. This was stated by State Department spokesperson Ned Price at a news briefing. Ned Price said the U.S. continues to encourage all sides to take part constructively in talks, as this is a moment when progress is possible. Price said U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad would be based in Doha for some time to support the peace process. He added Washington will continue to diplomatically engage with the parties to support the intra-Afghan dialogue. He said the U.S. has been interested throughout to find the means to quell violence. United Kingdom's Chief of Defence Staff General Nicholas Patrick Carter has lauded Pakistan's continuous efforts for peace and stability in the region. He acknowledged Pakistan's efforts in a meeting with Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. According to the military's media wing, matters of mutual interest, including the Afghan peace process and defense cooperation, were discussed during the meeting. Both sides discussed the evolving global geostrategic environment. General Carter also pledged to further enhance bilateral relations between both countries. Now, the Arab coalition says it has intercepted another armed drone launched by Yemen's Houthis towards southern Saudi Arabia. The Saudi state media says the explosive-laden drone was aimed at Khamis Mushait city. The latest strike comes after the U.S. called on the Yemeni rebels to stop attacking and start negotiating. In a briefing, State Department spokesman Ned Price said the Houthis must demonstrate their willingness to engage in a political process for peace in Yemen. Price said the U.S. remains deeply concerned by the frequency of Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, in a tweet, Houthi spokesperson Yahya Sarai said the group has again launched missiles at the Abha International Airport. However, Riyadh is yet to comment on this development. Moving on now, Jordan's King, Bahrain's Crown Prince and the Malaysian Prime Minister have arrived in Saudi Arabia to discuss regional issues. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman received the leaders upon their arrival in the capital, Riyadh. In a tweet, Saudi Foreign Ministry said Crown Prince Salman and Jordan's King Abdullah reviewed bilateral ties. It said the leaders discussed cooperation in several fields and opportunities to serve mutual interests. And Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa commended Riyadh's role in serving the causes of the Muslim world. Meanwhile, Salman is set to sign multiple MOUs in his talks with Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin today. Now, Lebanon's army chief has berated politicians for their handling of the crisis, warning of an unstable security situation. Now, it comes after a week of protests in the country over a collapsing economy and paralyzed government. Army Chief General Joseph Aoun said its troops should not get sucked into the political deadlock. At a meeting with military commanders, the Army Chief stressed the right to peaceful protest. Earlier, in a meeting with top officials, President Michel Aoun ordered the security forces to clear roadblocks. The meeting at the presidency stipulated a crackdown on anyone violating monetary and credit laws. Now, Iran has started enriching uranium with the third cascade of advanced IR2M centrifuges. The International Atomic Energy Agency said the enrichment is being carried out at an underground plant at the Natanz facility. In a report, the IAEA said the fourth cascade of the same class centrifuge has been installed but is yet to be fed uranium. It added that Iran is now using 522 centrifuges of this class to enrich uranium up to 5% of purity. Now, this is more than the 3.67% allowed under the 2015 nuclear deal, but less than the 20% it is enriching at the Fordo facility. Last month, Iran's atomic agency vowed that Tehran will install 1,000 such centrifuges at Natanz in less than 3 months. Now, moving to Myanmar, where security forces have detained a group of mainly women in the southern coastal city of Make. Demonstrations have been held daily for more than a month against the military coup and to demand the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. In the main city of Yangon, hundreds of protesters trapped by security forces overnight were released after calls from the United Nations. Thousands of people defied a nighttime curfew to rally in support of the besieged protesters. Additionally, the military government stripped 5 media companies of their license for covering the crisis. Meanwhile, a Malaysian court has allowed rights groups to challenge the recent deportation of Myanmar's nationals. Now, in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, another Indian soldier has committed suicide in an army camp in the Kachal area of Kupwara district. 494 Indian troops have taken their lives in the occupied territory since January 2007. The soldier Trived Prakash reportedly shot himself with his service rifle. An investigation has been started to ascertain the motive behind the incident. Last week, 3 Indian soldiers, including a lieutenant colonel, committed suicide in a span of 24 hours in the area. According to a report, over 35 Indian troops in the occupied valley killed themselves in 2020 alone. Now, in India's Delhi court, a non-profit organization has petitioned against the country's new rules that seek to regulate content on digital news media. New Delhi announced the Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code last month. The Foundation for Independent Journalism argued that such curbs are unacceptable in a democracy. The case will next be heard on April 16th. The rules lay a three-tier regulatory structure for news media by the federal government, which has sparked concerns for freedom of speech. The regulations are part of Prime Minister Modi's efforts to regulate online content, including Facebook, Twitter and Netflix. Now, the death toll in a series of explosions in Equatorial Guinea has risen to 98. The Health Ministry says over 600 people were injured in the blast at a military base in Bata City. In a statement, President Teodoro Obiang Nguema said the blasts were due to the negligent handling of dynamite. The Health Ministry has asked for volunteers and blood donations due to the high number of casualties. The blasts come amid an economic shock due to the coronavirus pandemic and a drop in the price of crude oil. Now moving to Senegal, where the opposition leader Ousmane Sonko has called for large but peaceful anti-government protest. He spoke at a news conference in Dakar after authorities freed him on bail following days of violent demonstrations. Blaming President Macky Sall for his arrest, Sonko said the incumbent wants to sideline political rivals before the 2024 elections. Meanwhile, Sall called for calm and an end to street protests that have rocked the country. Amnesty International says at least 8 people died in clashes between security forces and protesters in the past week. The Senegalese Red Cross reported some 235 demonstrators have been injured. The global number of coronavirus cases has crossed 117 million, with the death toll approaching 2.6 million. The United Kingdom recorded its lowest number of infections and deaths in 5 months, with 65 fatalities and some 4,700 cases overnight. More details in this report.
As humanity gains some leeway against the coronavirus through vaccinations and restrictions, new variants seemed ready to undo the progress. A study indicates that China's Sinovac vaccine is effective against the variant first detected in Brazil. Meanwhile, in the United States, recent tests of wastewater samples in Houston show ongoing and uncontrolled community spread of the UK variant. In newly released guidelines, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says fully vaccinated Americans can visit other vaccinated people as well as small groups of unvaccinated people in some circumstances. And the World Health Organization says some countries should have listened more carefully when it declared a global health emergency in January 2020.
The fact that countries, I can fully understand maybe from a media perspective that a member of the public and others might not necessarily react to the declaration of a global public health emergency under the IHR by the Director General. But that is an agreement between all member states on this planet who agreed in law that this would represent the trigger to collective action in response for containment.
The European Union has criticized Belgium for extending a blanket ban on non-essential travel to and from the country. The UK has warned that reopening schools will impact infection rates and affect the roadmap for lifting restrictions. Italy has lifted a ban on the use of AstraZeneca vaccine for over 65s. Meanwhile, the Dutch Prime Minister says most restrictions must remain in place for now.
The most important news is that we will extend the current measures up until Tuesday, March 30, the evening curfew included, which will continue until the morning of Wednesday, March 31. For the 3 election days, Monday, March 15th, Tuesday, March 16th, and Wednesday, March 17th, there will be some exceptions, because of course a curfew cannot and must not stand in the way of free elections.
In Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the vaccination drive will finish by October despite initial delays. Meanwhile, Syrian media reported that President Bashar al-Assad and his wife have tested positive for the virus.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 54 more coronavirus-linked deaths overnight. The death toll has jumped to 13,281. Additionally, the Health Ministry reported more than 1,300 new cases over the last 24 hours. The ministry has so far confirmed over 593,000 cases countrywide, of which more than 563,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, the active cases are down to just a little over 16,000. Now, at least 9 people have died after a fire broke out at the Eastern Railway's headquarters in India city of Kolkata. Rescue officials say firemen, railway staff and a policeman are among those dead. 2 of the 9 dead bodies were recovered from an elevator. The fire broke out on the 13th half of the 14-story building. The government has set up a committee to ascertain the cause of the fire. Now, the European Parliament has voted to strip the immunity from prosecutions of Carles Puigdemont and 2 other Catalan lawmakers. The 3 are wanted in Spain on charges of sedition in relation to a 2017 independence referendum. Puigdemont, the former head of the regional government, is in self-imposed exile in Belgium. He formerly became a member of the European Parliament in 2019. Madrid is expected to move to reactivate a European arrest warrant to bring them back to the country for trial. Now, in the United States, a task force report has recommended wide-ranging security upgrades at the Capitol. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi requested the report after the January 6 Capitol Hill riots that left 5 people dead. The 15-page report suggested the creation of a quick reaction force in Washington. It criticized Capitol Police's preparedness and recommended an upgrade to its intelligence capabilities and training. The report stated that the force was understaffed, insufficiently equipped and inadequately trained. The task force also called for installing an integrated retractable fencing system around the compound. Now, the US says Muslim visa applicants affected by the previous administration's ban can submit another application. President Joe Biden has overturned his predecessor Donald Trump's travel ban on 13 countries. The State Department says people refused a visa before 20th of January 2020 will have to pay the fee with new applications. Spokesperson Ned Price said those denied a visa after the date may seek reconsideration without the same. Meanwhile, the U.S. has also offered temporary protected status to thousands of Venezuelans for 18 months. This will shield them from deportation and allow them to work legally in the country. Now, thousands of Paraguayans gathered around the Congress in the capital, Asunción, for the 4th day against President Mario Abdo. The protesters have slammed the government's handling of COVID-19 amid a spike in nationwide cases. Despite impeachment calls, President Abdo appears to have enough support to see off any challenge. However, he has been forced to shuffle his cabinet in the interest of pacification. An impeachment trial is only possible with the support of a group led by former President Horacio Cartes within the ruling party. Paraguay's total number of infections has topped 169,000, with over 3,300 deaths. Now, authorities have issued evacuation order after a dam on the Hawaiian island of Maui has been breached due to the heavy rains. In a tweet, Hawaii Governor David said people living in vicinity of Kapakalua Dam should evacuate their homes. He said authorities are still confirming the current status of the dam as heavy rains continues to pose a potential threat to the dam. He urged the residents to continue to stay out of the area until the danger has passed. Moving on now, Colombia is targeting a 30% reduction in deforestation during President Ivan Duque's term. The target, less ambitious than one previously floated, is meant to stem tree felling in the country. In an interview, Environment Minister Carlos Eduardo Correa hoped the 30% cut can be exceeded. He said the administration is making efforts to reach the 50% target floated last year. The government has set its sight on planting 180 million trees throughout the country by the end of the term. According to a report published last year, Colombia was the deadliest country for environmental activists in 2019. Now, China's Chang'e 4 probe has started the 28th lunar day of work on the far side of the moon. China's National Space Administration says the mission has survived 795 Earth days on the moon so far. During the 28th lunar day, the probe named Jade Rabbit 2 will move northwest towards the basalt area with high reflectivity. Chang'e 4 is a robotic spacecraft mission, part of the second phase of the Chinese lunar exploration program. It made the first ever landing on the Von Karman crater in the South Pole Aitken Basin on the moon on January 3, 2019. Scientists hunting for signs of ancient life on Mars are also researching on a lake in southern Turkey to help their research. NASA says the minerals and rocks deposits at Lake Salda are the nearest match on Earth to those around the Jezero crater on Mars. Let's find out more in this report.
Information gathered from Lake Salda may help the scientists as they search for fossilized traces of microbial life on the red planet. The signs of life may be preserved in sediment thought to have been deposited around the delta and the long-vanished lake it once fed. Scientists believe that the sediments around the lake eroded from large mounds that are formed with the help of microbes.
From everything we know right now, from the data we have, and I just want to tell you, we've only just driven a few yards on the surface, and we only know what's around us. So far, we believe that the Lake Salda analog with Jezero crater is absolutely a good analog and will be useful for many years to come.
The team behind Perseverance, the most advanced lab ever flown to another world, wants to find out whether there are microbial lights in Jezero crater. They will compare the beach sediments from Salda with carbonate minerals detected on the margins of Jezero crater. Samples of rock drilled from Martian soil are to be stored on the surface for eventual retrieval and delivery to Earth by future robotic missions.
Now, French luxury fashion brand Christian Dior has given Little Red Riding an edgy makeover for its latest collection. Dior filled the Paris Fashion Week's runway with hooded capes and recreated a moon slit seen in the Versailles Palace Hall of Mirrors. More details in this report.
Due to the coronavirus restrictions, Dior skipped its traditional catwalk show for an online version filmed in a chateau outside Paris. The show featured black-littered dresses with puff sleeves, princess-style tulle gowns, and velvet coats among the winter styles. Maria Grazia Chiuri, the designer, sought to stamp an overt feminist stance on her designs.
My idea was more to give different outfits where the women can choose and to build their character in some way. I think that we are not to forget that fashion help women to build their personality, to also to represent themselves in different way. And I don't want to forget that fashion has to be also playful.
Earlier, luxury brand Givenchy also presented its latest collection as part of the virtual Paris Fashion Week. Models, some in voluminous furry coats and headwear covering almost their entire heads, walked the runway in Givenchy's video presentation. Starting in black and dark-colored garments, then later white and cream outfits with bursts of lavender, red, and tan. The show featured both male and female models that strutted in darkly lit venue and over puddles of water. The ready-to-wear Paris Fashion Week runs until 10th of March.
Now, most of the European shares have slipped after posting their best session in 4 months as a retreat in commodity prices pressured miners. The pan-European stock 600 fell 0.1% in early deals, with miners falling 1.9% and automakers dropping 1%. The German DAX seized 0.3% after hitting an all-time high in the previous session, whereas London's FTSE 100 index edged up by 0.2%. Today's trade follows the more cautious tone set in the Asia-Pacific region, where markets traded mixed. Now, in football, Chelsea continue their impressive turnaround as they beat Everton 2-0 in their Premier League encounter. The win leaves the Blues in fourth place with 50 points. German forward Kai Havertz played a key role in both goals on his return to the starting 11. The Blues secured a lead in the 31st minute when Everton defender Ben Godfrey turned a Havertz shot into his own net. Jorginho then doubled Chelsea's lead in the 64th minute when he scored from the spot. The Blues are now 2 points ahead of fifth-placed West Ham, who dominated Leeds United 2-0. Goals by Jesse Lingard and Craig Dawson maintained the Hammers' push for a top-4 finish in the league. Now, in Italian Serie A, leaders Inter Milan have strengthened their position as they beat Atlanta 1-0 to go 6 points clear atop league. The 7th league win in a row took Inter one step closer to first Serie A title in 11 years. Inter looked nervous in the first half and had goalkeeper Samir Handanovic to thank for making a fine save. Milan's Skriniar then fired them in front as he pounced on a loose ball from a corner just 9 minutes after the interval. However, Antonio Conte's side had to dig in defensively later on to secure the victory. The defeat leaves Atlanta in 5th place with 49 points, a point behind Roma. Now let's have a look at the weather updates from around the world. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.